Hello everyone and welcome to Toxic Moonlight. My name is Jared and today I'll be taking a look at a lesser known modern deck right now, Abzan Midrange. Just keep in mind that I made this deck myself and that decks can vary from meta to meta, so when building this deck, try to be keen on what your meta is and adapt to it. This deck was recommended to me in my last video by my friend Dan. If you want to recommend a topic for my next video, leave your ideas in the comments below and maybe they'll become a video. And remember, if you like watching deck techs like these, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe for more MTG videos. Now that that's all taken care of, let's begin. One of the problems that I've encountered when researching this archetype is its game plan. How does it win? Well, the good news is that the only way this deck can win is by reducing your opponent's life total to 0. That I understand. But how does it plan to do so? It took me a while to figure it out, but I found that Abzan's biggest strength is in its adaptation in most matchups. When an Abzan player sits at the table, they don't have a direct game plan. Rather, their game plan changes depending on the opponent. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of what each individual matchup looks like, but the general consensus is that the deck wants to outlast aggro, out-tempo control, and disrupt combo. Our first card is going to be 3 copies of Grimflayer. This card doesn't look like much on the surface. A 2/2 with Trample isn't very useful even for 2 mana, but where this card shines is with its second ability. When Grimflayer deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Then, you can put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest on top of your deck in any order. This card is one of the reasons that makes this deck so adaptive. When this ability triggers, pay attention to what kind of deck you are playing against, and judge what you want to draw and what you want in your graveyard to try and give yourself the upper hand. Not to mention that with Delirium online, you get a better chance of getting Grimflayer's trigger. The next card is 2 copies of Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze is great in this deck because for 1 green mana allows you to exile any card from a graveyard. This is great against decks who play Snapcaster Mage or any dredge deck that likes to abuse their graveyard, with the added benefit of getting a +1/+1 counter and gaining 1 life if you exile a creature this way. Next, we have a playset of Tarmogoyf. With a meta full of fetch lands, creatures dying at every turn, and counter spells, almost every green deck requires Tarmogoyf because it can be an absolute powerhouse and swing in for massive damage. The last creature with a major impact once it hits the board is Siege Rhino. We're playing 2 of them in this build. For 4 mana, you not only get a 4/5 with Trample, but when it enters the battlefield, you drain your opponents for 3 life. It was the bane of Standard and is a powerhouse in this deck. This deck runs 2 kinds of token producers, and the main one is a playset of Lingering Souls. The ability to make 2 1/1 flyers is already great, but how this card shines is with Flashback. For 2 mana, you can cast Lingering Souls from your graveyard and get 2 more 1/1s with flying. That's what makes this card fantastic. You don't even care if you get to cast it from your hand the first time. Say you have Grimflayer and you trigger his ability. If you see a Lingering Souls on top, you can safely put it into your graveyard to make way for cards you really need on top of your deck and be able to cast Lingering Souls cheaper than what you would have if it was in your hand. This card is stupidly good. The other less notable token producers are 2 Tireless Tracker. Now let me tell you one thing, never cast Tireless Tracker on turn 3. Always wait until turn 4. Because if you play this on turn 3, you're not guaranteed you will get your clue token your next turn because your opponent will most likely have removal. However, if you play this on turn 4 before you play your land for the turn, your opponent can't respond to someone playing a land, so you will get at least 1 clue before your opponent has the opportunity to get rid of it. If Tireless Tracker gets to stick around for a while, combine this with fetch lands and other lands that we will cover later in the land section of this video. This deck plays 2 different copies of Planeswalkers. The first is an obvious playset of Liliana of the Veil. Her +1 is and always will be good against any deck because universal card disadvantage is always fair, right? Her -2 is great against any deck that plays troublesome cards like Etch Champion or Slippery Bogle or Geist of Saint Draft. And finally, her -6 is completely debilitating to your opponent. I can almost guarantee that if you get to use Liliana's -6, you've already won the game. It is so hard to come back from something as detrimental as that. We're also playing one more Planeswalker, in the form of Liliana the Last Hope. Her +1 can straight up be removal for almost any creature in Modern. Her -2 can help fuel your Grimflayer, Scavenging Ooze, or Termagoyf. And her -7 can lead to a win by gaining so much incremental value with zombie tokens. Not as good as Liliana of the Veil, but good enough to run a single copy. Our removal is fairly simple. We have 3 copies of Fatal Push to get rid of any early creatures, and since we get to play fetch lands in Modern, makes giving Revolt online even easier. 2 copies of Abrupt Decay in case you need an uncounterable removal spell, 1 Maelstrom Pulse to get rid of 1 or more permanents from the board, and 3 Path to Exile to get rid of anything that the others can't. Now, one of the ways that this deck can adapt to your opponent's deck is by receiving perfect information of your opponent's hand and being able to get rid of what we don't like from their hand. We can do this by casting either Inquisition of Kozilek or Thoughtseize. These 2 spells allow us to get perfect knowledge of your opponent's hand and let you in on what kind of deck they're playing and what you should be prepared for. They also act like removal spells, probably getting rid of your opponent's best cards before they're able to cast them, all for 1 single black mana. We're also playing 1 copy of Collective Brutality because of its versatility. Sometimes you need hand disruption, sometimes you need to kill a creature, sometimes you need your opponent to lose 2 more life, or all 3. Since we're in 3 colors, our land base will look a little confusing. We start with 3 Blooming Marsh as a fast land, 1 Godless Shrine, 2 Overgrown Tomb, and 1 Temple Garden as our shock lands, 3 Marsh Flats, 4 Verdant Catacombs, and 2 Windswept Heath as our fetch lands, 2 Shambling Vent to be able to threaten a 2/3 with lifelink, and then we round out the rest with a forest, 2 swamps, and a single plains. With a diverse format comes a diverse sideboard. This particular deck runs 2 Stony Silence against any affinity matchup, 3 Fulminator Mage to get rid of any troublesome lands like Celestial Colonnade or Mutavault, 2 more Collective Brutality if we need more disruption, 2 Nihil Spellbomb to get rid of any graveyard shenanigans, 2 Surgical Extractions to stop combo dead in its tracks, a copy of Damnation for a complete board clear, a copy of Flaying Tendrils in case Damnation didn't do the trick the first time, 1 Gideon Ally of Zendikar for added board presence and pressure, and finally 1 additional Maelstrom Pulse, because more removal is always good. Modern Abzan is a deck that doesn't really know what it's doing until it gets there, cluttering up the board with hard-to-deal creatures while ensuring that your opponent can't remove those creatures once you have them. If this deck interests you, feel free to use this deck list as a reference when building it or learning to fight against it. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like and share it with your friends. If you want to see more MTG videos like this one, feel free to subscribe for more content. Like I said in the beginning of the video, this video was requested by my friend Dan in my last video. If you want to suggest a topic for next week's video, leave your ideas in the comments below, and maybe it'll happen. Until next time, see ya.